Good afternoon and welcome to today's event, Financial Modeling Best Practices, hosted by CFA Society Chicago's Professional Development Advisory Group. Information on our upcoming events can be found on our website at www.cfachicago.org. I'm Chris Vincent, CEO of the Society. A couple of housekeeping items for everyone in attendance. Your mics will automatically be muted. We are going to use the Q&A feature to ask questions, and we are recording the event. Today's speaker is Ian Schnoor, Executive Director of the Financial Modeling Institute, also known as FMI. In this role, he works on the creation and execution of FMI's strategy. He's a principal and founder of the Marquee Group, a leading provider of financial modeling training to professionals in the financial community. He is widely known in the CFA Institute Society world. He teaches at Queen's University and is a past recipient of the Instructor of the Year Award in the Master of Finance program at the Smith School of Business. Prior to establishing the Marquee Group, Ian spent a number of years in investment banking at Citi and BMO Capital Markets. If you looked him up on LinkedIn, you'd see someone that has said, I saw him teach a financial modeling class and I remember his extraordinary energy and passion. That was really refreshing. And that's fantastic. He is joined by a colleague today, Julian Kupalari, and I will now turn it over to Ian. Thanks for being here. He's coming to us from Toronto.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can. Good to see you. Thanks for visiting us.
Chris, thank you so much for having me and Julian here today. We're really thrilled to be here with all of you. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump right in, guys. Good afternoon or good evening to everyone here as we just get set up. We're thrilled to be here with you guys today for this afternoon's webinar. I'm just pulling up all of you as well. By the way, before I get into some intros and some introductory comments, just want you to see, I know we're using webinar mode in Zoom, but I can still see you and I can kind of feel everyone here in the room. If you see me looking over to my right, I'm looking at you. I got a list of everyone here. There's a phenomenal turnout and a great number of you guys here for today's session. So thrilled that you're all able to kind of dial in and be here with us for the next 90 minutes on today's topic on financial modeling best practices. So again, I'm Ian Schnoor, Executive Director of the Financial Modeling Institute. I'm here with my colleague, Julian. Julian's responsible for marketing and business development at the FMI. He is also going to help me with the Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions, guys, during today's webinar, please go either into the chat button or the Q&A button, and you're welcome to add questions, and Julian's going to compile them all. And for the last 10 minutes or so, he'll come on and we will go back and forth and discuss as many of them as we can get through. And if there's lots of questions, we're happy to stick around for an extra 5 or 10 minutes. Some of the webinars have gone a little bit late because there's been a lot of great questions, and we love to stick around if there are some. So want to just do a couple quick minutes of housekeeping and make sure everyone is set up, and then we'll jump right in here. First of all, as I said, I know we're in webinar mode, but I'm going to do everything I can to try and keep this a bit of a two-way discussion. I'm going to start by asking you to help me out by either raising your thumb or your hand. First of all, can everyone hear me okay? I know Chris said he could, but do me a favor, just raise your hand. It really helps me to know. Yeah, I can see a few hands going up. Excellent, fantastic, great. Tons of hands going up, amazing. So you guys, I can see you all. Great to see all of your names, and you can hear okay. Excellent, great. Well then, let's do this. I've got, as I said, so this is a 90-minute webinar on financial modeling best practices. I've got about 5 minutes or so of a few more introductory comments. Again, I want to thank Chris for the very warm welcome, and for the CFA Society of Chicago for having us in. This is, I think, around the 35th or 40th time that we have been delivering these webinars in our webinar series to CFA societies all over the world. We've been running them in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, and and of course, right here in North America. So really thrilled to be here with CFA Society Chicago. So Chris told you a little bit about my background. Just to add a little bit to that, I'm going to just jump a couple slides in. Oh, by the way, one more housekeeping item. I'm going to try and move fairly quickly because I want to cover as much as I possibly can. I'm going to try and keep it punchy. And but the webinar is being recorded. So if you want to watch something again or see something again, you're welcome to go back. The link should be up in the next day or so, and you'll be informed of that from the society, number one. Secondly, I'm going to be reviewing a number of materials. I've got slides that you're going to see here on my screen. I also have a financial model that I'm going to be showing you, and I have some notes that I'm going to take in a spreadsheet. All of those files we're going to send off to the CFA Society. So everything I'm showing you here today, you're going to get sent to you once the webinar is over, so you'll have them as a resource. As Chris mentioned, I am the executive director of the Financial Modeling Institute. Started my career many years ago, over 20 years ago, in banking, in investment banking. I did traditional M&A type work, capital markets work at both Citibank and BMO. And then around 20 years ago, I left banking, and I started this business. This is a training firm that I started called the Marquee Group. And through the Marquee Group, we provide training in financial modeling, in advanced Excel topics, in valuation. We've recently launched a data sciences platform as well. And we run training at lots and lots of banks all over the world, mostly in North America, but we run courses all over the place. We teach at pension funds and lots of business schools. And that's kind of what we do at the Marquee Group. The Financial Modeling Institute is different. We started this with some partners a number of years ago to address what we felt was a need in the market. And that was the ability for people to validate their financial modeling skills. So I've been teaching modeling for over 20 years. Last count, I was looking at it. I think I've taught over 25 or 30,000 people in the past 20 years, a couple thousand days of content that I've taught personally. Always enjoy teaching and get very passionate, excited about this particular topic. But one thing that occurred to us years ago was that there was no way for anybody to truly validate their modeling skills. People would put on their resume that they attended a course. In fact, I'm just curious, how many people here, raise your hand, how many people have ever taken a course? I'm guessing a lot of you have in financial modeling. I'm guessing many of you have. Great, raise your hands if you've ever taken a class in financial modeling. Great, perfect. Many of you have. What a lot of people would do is that they would attend a course, and then on their resume, they would say that they attended a course offered by whomever, by a certain training firm, the Marquee Group, or whomever. But just because you attended a course doesn't actually mean you have tremendous, rigorous skills. And we recognized that there was no way in the world to truly validate your skills. So we went out to launch an organization that's truly exclusively in the domain of testing in the field of financial modeling. And that is the Financial Modeling Institute. We offer, I'm only going to spend a minute talking about it, but you're going to get the resources. It's a 3-level program at this point of certification, and each certification is sort of its own level. So the level 1 is called the Advanced Financial Modeler level. It's a 4-hour exam where you have to build up a financial model in Excel from scratch. Very much like the one that I'm going to show you today, and that you're going to get sent after the program, is to truly, truly prove that people have strong modeling skills. We ask them to build one up from scratch. Our exams used to take place in person, but due to COVID, we moved all the exams to be virtual, still proctored. People are really enjoying that. We had candidates from over 65 countries in the world at the last seating. So I think we're going to stick with virtual exams, at least for the foreseeable future. People seem to like writing and doing the exams at home or at their own office. When you get the deck, you can take a look at the very back. We have a bunch of slides in here on what the FMI does, how we work, our rigor, what our mission and values are. What we're trying to set out to do is to kind of create a fairly high bar of skill calibration and standards all over the world. So take a look at this if you like, when you have a moment. If you have any questions, don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to follow us on social media. If you want to follow our LinkedIn page, you'll see what we're up to. We've got lots of exciting plans for the periods ahead. And that's a little bit about what we do. So why are we here today? Well, we were approached a couple of years ago by the former CEO of the CFA Institute, Paul Smith. I don't know if anyone knew or met Paul. Paul and a lot of the senior executives at the Institute became aware of what we were doing, and we're very big fans of the FMI. They told us that the number one request, okay, they said the number one request of CFA candidates and charter holders around the world is to please add financial modeling into the CFA program, into the CFA curriculum. But they can't. They said they can't. It's too much to add. The CFA program already has, a huge amount of content and material, and they are not planning to offer modeling anytime soon. So they were thrilled to know that we are out there, and we should have shared similar values in terms of having very challenging, rigorous exams, and have encouraged us to develop relationships with societies all over the world, which is what we've done. And we've developed a free webinar series. Today is topic 1 on modeling best practices. I'm going to share with you today my favorite 10 tips to build a world-class model. Very simple tips, simple tips, but they can have a huge impact on any financial model. We've already been leading topic 2 all over the world, and it's been really well received. Last week, we were in New Zealand. Well, not actually in New Zealand, but leading a webinar for a big group in New Zealand, and I've been doing it all over the world on tips to check and review a financial model, what to do when something looks like it's going wrong. So if you guys enjoyed today's webinar and want to do another one, we'd be more than happy to come back and lead the next one in our series. So that's kind of how we got here. And again, we're really appreciative of the CFA Institute and societies for having us in to work with you guys in your pursuit of modeling skills. So let's jump in now. It is now 1/4 the hour. I'm going to go for about an hour, or maybe just over an hour and 5 minutes, an hour, 7 minutes roughly. I know it's 5 o'clock in at least in Chicago anyway. It's just after 5. So we'll go in Chicago time, Central time, till around 6:20, and then leave about 10 minutes for questions at the end. And I want to share with you, as I said, my favorite tips, because I've probably built, personally, guys, I've probably built over 100 models from my time in banking to my time here in the last 20 years. I've taught lots of people, and I've kind of distilled some really critical ideas down to these 10 ideas, which I believe, and my promise today is that if you can internalize and think about even some of these tips and incorporate them in your own models, you will start to have more powerful, more capable tools that you can use to in your forecasting and planning, okay? And one key idea to begin with is that modeling itself is a discipline. It's not just a skill. It's more than that. It's a discipline, and it's one has been up until recently, I think, a little bit underappreciated. But modeling has become mainstream, and that's, again, part of why we're here. When I started my career in banking, nobody expected me to have modeling skills before I started, but now it's almost a prerequisite. In fact, I've got a question for you guys. Raise your hands. How many of you have ever seen a job posting that said, we're looking for, I don't know, CFA charter holders or accountants, but we also want to see proven financial modeling skills? Has anyone ever seen a job posting? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of hands go up. Christian, Jen, Eric, a lot of hands go up. Dustin, yeah, a lot of you are saying you have seen job postings that actually say we want people that have proven modeling skills. Can I tell you something? That's new. That's brand new. Like in the last 5 or 7 years, people have been putting that on job postings. Previously, nobody expected candidates to have modeling skills before they got hired, but now they do. And so it's very important to understand what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. So I want to share a few notes with you. I'm going to keep a bunch of notes. I always love to do this in courses. Now I'm going to move very quickly here today. I can't actually hear you, but I know you're there. And I always like to start a course by just asking a very simple question, which is, what is a financial model? I like to ask it because, believe it or not, over the years, I've gotten lots of different answers from people about what a financial model really means. I like to tell people that it's a couple different things. First of all, it's a virtual representation, usually of a company, right? We're trying to take a company and recreate that company virtually in a spreadsheet. So that's part of what it is. But my favorite answer to what a financial model is simply forecast. That's it. All we're trying to do is build a forecast for a company and forecast them into the future. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have built? a few financial models at least. How many of you have done some extensive modeling, built up a bunch of models on your own in the past? Okay, a few hands going up, a bunch of hands going up. Yeah, some have, many of you have not. I'm sure that we have a wide range of experience in the room, in our little virtual Zoom room here today. Some of you have probably done an extensive amount of modeling. For those of you who've done a lot of modeling, I hope that you can take a couple tips and ideas away that are a little different. I'm also going to share some technical skills today that you might find helpful. For those of you who have not done a lot of modeling, I hope you kind of come away with a better sense for what modeling is and how you can build a best-in-class, world-class model. By the way, how far in the future do we typically So I told you modeling is just a forecast, right? All we're trying to do is take a company's historical financials and forecast them into the future. That's it. How far? Typically 5 to 10 years in the future. That's typically what we do. It's more of a personal preference, and some industries have expectation longer. Has anyone ever been involved in seeing or working on a longer forecast model? Has anyone ever been involved in a model that was, let's say, a 20-year or a 30-year? I'll look over. Raise your hands if you've ever been involved in a really long life model that's longer. Yeah, some industries like infrastructure models or natural resource models for oil and gas or mining, sometimes they have longer forecast models. I recently, in my travels, encountered the very longest forecast model I had ever seen in my life. Company I was working with showed me their model, and they were forecasting 120 years. I said, really? You really need to forecast 120 years? You're going to be dead, you know? But they said, yeah, that's kind of silly, actually. I don't know why we need to forecast that long. So they cut it back to 60. Still, in my mind, a little bit long, but whatever. People build longer forecast models for various reasons. The point is that doesn't matter. All we're trying to do is build a forecast for the company. Then the question is why? Why are we forecasting? Well, this is an obvious one. I hope for most people is that models have become, I will tell you, models have become easily the most important decision-making tools in all of finance. Financial models have become the most important decision-making tools in all of finance. We use our models for so many types of decisions. There's an issue I'm getting to here in a moment, but they are critical. So many decisions, like what? Well, the most common decisions when people raise their hand in a class, people always talk about valuation decisions, which is true. We do build models to make valuation decisions, investment decisions. Sure, we do, but that's not all. Those are not the only decisions we make. People build models to evaluate credit opportunities or to evaluate leveraged buyout opportunities with a lot of debt. People build models just to evaluate companies' operations or to do budgeting. People build models to evaluate M&A opportunities, divestitures, acquisitions, and they build models to evaluate risk and volatility. That's it. But so there's lots and lots of reasons we build models. And again, as I said, primarily all we're trying to do is forecast a company into the future. It sounds so simple. It sounds really easy. All we're doing is taking the income statement, cash flow, and balance sheet and forecasting them into the future. But there's a problem, and that's why we're here today. The problem is this. The problem is that most financial models are a mess. Most financial models are a mess. In fact, I would go as far as to say many of them are a disaster. And because of that, they make it very, very difficult for people to use their models to make powerful decisions. So why is it? Why is it that so many financial models don't work very well? They have mistakes in them. They don't communicate clearly. They're hard to audit. They're hard to navigate. And it's because people haven't followed a discipline or they haven't known a discipline. They've just made it up. Most people just make up their modeling skills as they go. Let's take a look at the slides here for a second. I always like to tell people part of the reason I like modeling so much is it's very much a multidisciplinary skill. To be really good at modeling, you have to have a number of skills. First of all, you've got to be really good at Excel. That is the tool that most of us use. Are some people using Google Sheets? Maybe. We're not seeing a lot of corporate modeling done yet in Google. That day will come, but right now it's still primarily done in Excel. We need to understand design. I will tell you right now, guys, the number one reason why models fail and why they collapse is because of poor design. I'm going to talk about a few design ideas here today as well. We have to have some good accounting skills. We need to understand how the financial statements tie together and talk together. How does one cost item impact the income statement and then flow through the cash flow statement? And where does it hit the balance sheet? And how does subsidiary accounting work? And what are the tax issues? So we have to have an understanding of accounting. By the way, do we have any accountants in the room? Do me a favor, guys, raise your hand. Is anyone here an accountant? Only 2 people want to admit it. Yeah, we've got a few accountants here. Although I'm sure all of you have studied accounting, taken some accounting courses. You don't need to be an accountant, but you need to understand it quite well to build a financial model. And you need to understand, of course, finance and things like operations. And our job is to pull it all together. So I will tell you this. I'm going to leave you with one takeaway before we even get started here. I will tell you one takeaway to begin our webinar is this, is that a good model needs to work in 2 different ways, okay? A good financial model needs to work in 2 different ways. So how do you know if you've built a model or you're working on a model? How do you know if your model is working well? Test it against these 2 criteria. If it passes these tests, it's probably a pretty good model. If it doesn't, it can get better. Number 1, I like to tell people that a good financial model needs to work electronically, which just means that every formula must make sense. Every formula has to be logical and obvious. So guys, let's pretend you were my client, or let's pretend you were my boss, and I built a model for you and I emailed it to you. If you ever open up my model and you click on a bunch of cells, you should start to feel like, yeah, that makes sense. I understand what Ian's doing. I could click in every cell and you would understand. Every formula would be logical and obvious. That doesn't happen all the time, right? Can anyone relate to this? How many people have ever clicked on a cell in a spreadsheet and you saw a formula that was so long that it wrapped around and around and around? Can you raise your hands? How many of you have ever seen formulas? Right, I see Alan and Betsy. Tess, yeah, oh, a lot of hands going up now. How many of you have seen formulas that are so long, they just wrap around and around and around? Yeah, many hands going up. Guys, it's not optimal. It can be better. Much more prone to error, much more prone to confusion, and it doesn't communicate clearly. So we have to make sure our calculations are built clearly, number 1. And a second way that a good model needs to work, guys, believe it or not, even in today's day and age, I will tell you that a good model must work well on paper, or I'm going to say, or as a, now we haven't been seeing each other in person as much. So I'll say, or as a PDF. The point is you need to be able to print or PDF a model and send it out as a 10-page or 20-page or 30-page document. And the reader needs to feel like they are reading a presentation. I will tell you that a good model, what I'm really saying is, needs to be a powerful communication tool. It has to be a powerful communication tool. It needs to tell a story. You probably never thought of yourself as a storyteller when you work in finance, but I will tell you, you've got to be an outstanding storyteller so you can sell your ideas. And a model has to be our tool to do that. So how do we make sure we build models, guys? How do we make sure our models work really well electronically and work really well on paper or as a PDF so that people are impressed and are having tremendous confidence? Well, we got to follow, in my view, a great model will adhere to many of the tips that I'm going to share with you. Now, in this Excel file, the top 10 best practices are here, and I'm going to go through them one at a time in just a moment. They also live in the slides. So when you get to the slides, you will see them here as well. Now, in terms of some basics, as I just said, a good model needs to be a powerful communication tool so you can use it to make effective decisions. It has to be dynamic, flexible, intuitive, printable. And when it achieves these criteria, you can transfer it to a client, to a colleague, and they will understand it as well. When it does that, a model, then it truly inspires confidence and allows you to make good decisions. So a lot of you guys raised your hands when I said, had you ever seen a really problematic model? And you had. because many models don't work that well. So there's area for improvement. So let's jump in here then to look at what do we do to build a very, very, powerful tool in our forecasting. Couple simple things. We're trying to keep it simple, keep our formulas simple, keep our design simple. This is just table stakes. Let's make sure we never hard code, never build formulas that look like this. Has anyone, do me a favor, guys, raise your hands. Has anyone ever clicked on a cell and seen something like this, A5 multiplied by a dead number, 0.025 plus 4. Has anyone ever seen something like this in a cell, right? Bunch of hands going up. Sure, right? Andy, you can see Joseph, a lot of hands going up. Every time I get a model sent to me, I'll find stuff like this. In a recent training session, I asked one of the participants, what does the 4.9 mean? And he raised his hand and tried to explain it to me. I said, you don't know what the 4.9 mean. I just made that up. But the point is, it's a dead number. I don't know what that means. I can't communicate it and I can't share it. So that's just a basic concept we need to kind of adhere to. But let's take a quick look now at what I believe are some really great best practices. Just from a time management standpoint, guys, I'm going to spend about the next half an hour going through the first 5 and then around 20 minutes going through the next 5. So the first 5 take a little bit more time because I'm going to show you some tips and skills. The next 5 are very, very important, but I can cover them much more quickly. Okay, so let's take a look at the very first 2 here. I will tell you that this is so critical. It is so critical, so important to build a plan. When you're building a model, start off with a plan. I know it sounds obvious, but I promise you most model builders don't do this. On our team, we often call this a scoping document. It allows you to think about everything that I need. What do I need to do to build up a powerful model? And it forces you to ask good questions. Guys, I love this portion of a new modeling exercise. I get to show up and ask so many questions because I don't know the business very well. If someone hires me to build a model of a company or our team, I don't know the company very well. This allows me to ask lots and lots of good questions. They might sound obvious, but they're not. I'm on another slide here. Like, first of all, what's the purpose of this model? I promise you, if you ever have to build a model and you ask 3 different people the purpose of it, you might get 3 different answers. And it's really helpful to understand, why do people feel it's necessary? What are we trying to achieve? Which assumptions do I need? What are the scenarios? How much detail do I require? Don't ever take these things for granted. This is a tremendous opportunity to really learn the business and understand how are we going to evaluate the results? How many time periods? What's the periodicity of this model? How should I present it? What's the right order? And my strong recommendation is to build a plan in these 3 steps. It's so easy. It's so simple, and yet it will take you steps ahead of anyone else. What I like to say is these are the 3 steps to model planning. We find this extremely helpful. Step number 1, I would say, is identify what we said early on the slide. You may have seen the major issues, or what we often call in corporate finance roles, we often call the key drivers. So what are the key drivers of the business? So what are key drivers? Well, the key drivers are just the most important inputs and assumptions in the model. And what's unique about them? Well, these assumptions are hard to forecast, and they're hard for management to control. Okay? Hard to forecast, hard to control, but they can have a big impact on success or failure. They can have a huge impact on the volatility of the business. So I want to make sure I understand, what are these variables? I will tell you, these are often economic variables like commodity prices, exchange rates, inflation rates, etc. Critical interest rates that could impact the business that management's going to have a hard time controlling. And because of that, I want to treat them. I'm going to show you in about 15 minutes how to treat these in a very particular way to build a model in a very, very powerful, organized way. So let's start by thinking about what are the critical variables that could impact a business as it rolls forward. That's going to be point number one. That's the first thing. And I would spend a few minutes doing that. Then I would say, think about all the assumptions. What I like to tell people to do here, and we do this, I would say make a giant list of all the inputs and assumptions that you need. All the inputs and assumptions you need, right? That you need in this model, because then you can challenge your client or your boss, and you can make sure that you've got the right data. Think about all the assumptions you're going to need for things like all the things like revenues, costs. What are the cost items? What are the labor costs? What are the energy costs of this business? How does it work? That's my job as a modeler, to understand this business really well. What other things? I want to understand their fixed assets. Are they going to be buying more assets? How do they depreciate their assets? What about things like working capital? How much inventory, receivables do they have and do they need? What about their debt? What about their equity? What about taxes? How does everything work? It allows me to make some, it allows me to think about the business and figure out what are the assumptions that I'm going to need to evaluate this particular company. It doesn't take very long to do this, but it's very, very powerful and allows you to get started. You know, the whole thing of planning probably only takes about a half an hour, but I assure you it'll get you on the right foot so that you can get started much, much more productively. The third thing I encourage people to do when you're building a plan is to plan out what the completed model will look like on paper once it's done. What I actually like to say is pretend for a moment you're building a PowerPoint deck. Guys, can I see a show of hands? How many of you have in the last year had to work on or build a PowerPoint deck, PowerPoint slides? Raise your hands for me if you've been involved, right? Thank you, Ben, Betsy. Yeah, I can see your hands going. Great. A lot of hands going up. Fantastic, right? Vincent, Daniel, a lot of you have built PowerPoint slides and decks. You know, if I asked you, I bet you a whole bunch of hands went up. I bet you that if I asked you, what's the first thing you do? What's the very first thing you do when you have to build a new PowerPoint deck? I always get the same answer. People tell me the first thing that they do is that they plan out the PowerPoint. They make the table of contents, right? They pretend you're building a PowerPoint deck. Think about the table of contents. What will be on each page? What's going to be on each page, right? Plan out each page. The same way you do that in a PowerPoint deck, you would do the same thing for a model. What's the right order? The optimal order is so important because it's going to be used to communicate and to tell a story about this business. So I know it sounds very simple, but I strongly encourage you to spend a few minutes on this. This will have a huge, huge impact on the ultimate effectiveness of the model. Now, I mentioned here in step 3, I'm now going to take this opportunity to share with you, what do I mean? When I said earlier, a good model should work not just powerfully in Excel, but I told you a good model needs to work as a paper tool, as a presentation tool. I'm going to show one to you right now. What will it look like if you've done a good job planning it? So let's take a look here. I'm going to switch my Excel files. I'm going to go into a model. Okay. Can everyone see my model here? This is an Excel model. This is a company called the Henderson Manufacturing Company. This is a generic manufacturing business. This is a sample model that we use at the Financial Modeling Institute. It's actually on the website. You're welcome. And we're going to send it to you after this webinar is over. But let's just take a look here. This is a model that's on 5 different tabs. There's a summary tab, assumptions, scenarios, and there's a model sheet. Now, we're going to spend some time today looking at it electronically. But before I show you this model in Excel, I want to show you what this model looks like on paper. Imagine that I printed the whole thing and we had an in-person meeting and I brought you the entire model on paper. Or imagine I sent you a PDF. It would look like this. So here's my slides. I'm going to go into the model. This is a printout or a PDF version of the model. Take a look, please, as I am going to zoom it in as I flip it. Very often, guys, what happens is when you show someone a completed model, they start to flip it. In fact, it's so common, I call it the executive page flip. An executive will start to flip the model just like this. Take a look. There's a cover page, right? A nice, simple cover page. After that, I have an executive summary values, and we'll talk about this page. I'm summarizing the model. After that, I have a couple pages on some inputs. You see on page 3, I've got some inputs and my assumptions. And I've got another page 4 of inputs. After that, I've got a scenario page. I'm going to talk about all these in more detail in just a couple of moments. I just want you to see it from 10,000 feet, right? Don't focus on any specific numbers, but take a look. I've got a scenarios page. Next, there's a revenue forecast for this business. It shows us how we're building up the company's revenues. Then I've got costs. Then I've got, no surprise, the income statement, right? Here's my income statement. And no surprise, after the income statement, the cash flow, the balance sheet. But the point, all I want you to focus on, please, right now, is I hope you feel like it almost looks like a bit of a presentation. Take a look. Every page has a header with a title and a subtitle. Do you notice that every page, the font is the same font and the same size? And I have an equal amount of space on every page. I've got a footer. I've got page numbers. These little, and I've used things like bold and lines. Guys, these little things have a huge impact on people's feeling of comfort and confidence. They feel like they're reading some slides. I actually get people all the time saying, Ian, did you build this in PowerPoint? Of course not. This comes right out of Excel. Just like this, it's legible, it's readable, and it feels like I could walk someone through it on paper. And that's so important in the ultimate ability to use it to make powerful decisions. So that's what I mean when I say a good model needs to feel like a communication tool. Let's take a look now at back to our takeaways. So we've talked about the first two. And I ask you, please, if you are building up a new model or even trying to fix an existing model, do yourself a favor, ask good questions and spend a few minutes planning it. It'll have a massive impact on your ability to work with the model and to build it effectively. The next tip I want to share with you here is this one. This is actually a little bit contentious, believe it or not. I'm going to show you a tip here that people sometimes challenge me on. I'm going to show you some really great, if you stick around over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you some really, really great Excel skills, a couple great tips that people often have never seen before. But I want to go through 3 and 4. Tip number 3 says, when you're building a financial model, my recommendation, keep your assumptions up front and make the data inputs a different color. Let's make them blue. So let's talk about both of these tips here. Let's come back now to the model that I just showed you, right? Remember, the first thing that was here was a cover page. Then there was an executive summary. And then we got into the model inputs and assumptions kind of right here up front. So let's talk for a moment about what's very, very helpful in models. I'm going to share with you a note that says optimal model flow. And you're seeing these, not floss, model flow. What is optimal model flow? You know, as I said, have built dozens and dozens of models, and I've looked at hundreds of models. The flow can be pretty consistent regardless of the company that you're modeling. My strong recommendation, guys, when you think about model flow, is to first put in a cover page. It sounds so silly, so simple, but I will tell you that most models that I have ever seen, most models do not do this. Most models don't have a cover page, but it's so simple. It's so simple to build. Why is it helpful? It creates confidence. It tells the reader, that this is actually a presentation. It's not just a giant calculator. It's a financial presentation. And what should you put on your cover page? I don't know. Put things like, what can you include on a cover page? Well, whatever you think would be helpful. Put things like the company logo, the company name, I don't know, put your name, whatever you want. Put your name, put the time, the date, whatever you think would be helpful, you can include on the cover, make it look nice, and away you go. By the way, if you want to include dates in Excel, there are 2 ways. Dates can either be static or they can be dynamic, right? A date can be static or dynamic. Just let me show you here. A static date means you're just entering a date in a cell. So for instance, if I type in May 19th, 2021, that's a dead date. It is typed into the cell. It's never going to change. Does anybody know a keyboard shortcut? Raise your hand if you know a nice keyboard shortcut in Excel to enter a static date. Does anyone know what this is? I'm going to show you. Anyone here know a nice keyboard shortcut to enter a date as a dead date? I don't see any hands going up. Watch this. By the way, guys, my belief is that if you want to work really effectively in Excel, you need to keep your hands on the keyboard. You want to minimize use of the mouse. So one of the tools I'm going to share with you here, you guys are going to get after this webinar is over, is our favorite, oops, this is the Mac version. Sorry, this is the Mac version. Well, we also have a PC version. We're going to send you both of our favorite keyboard shortcuts to keep your hands on the keyboard. People always love it when I tell them that my keyboard doesn't even have any letters on it. I don't know why. People ask me, why did you do that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, I don't know. My keyboard has no ink on it, no letters, no numbers, nothing. It's just black keys. Because when you do a lot of modeling, you don't even have to look at your keyboard. Just keep your hands on the keyboard and away from the mouse. So there's a really nice keyboard shortcut. If I want to put in a date, I don't want to type it in May and I make a typo May 19th. The nice keyboard shortcut is to just press the Control key plus a semicolon, right? Take a look. If I was to go to the cell and press Control semicolon, it types in today's date for me. Now that's still a dead date. It's never going to change, but at least I didn't type it all in. Control and the semicolon puts it in for me. So that's one way to put in a date. But some people like to put in dates that are live, that are dynamic, that change on their own. And there are two ways in Excel to enter a dynamic date. We can enter, many of you probably know this feature. It says equals today. You put an equals today with an open bracket and then a closed bracket. That will enter, right? Watch, if I did this, if I said equals today, it's going to pull in today's date, but now it's dynamic. So tomorrow, this one will change. You can also use another feature that's not nearly as well known. It's called equals now. The equals now function also generates a date, but it also includes time. So if you want to put in a dynamic date, you can use equals today or equals now. Those are the only ways to put dynamic dates in Excel. Otherwise, a date will be static. So that's pretty simple, pretty basic. But what I wanted you to see, build yourself a simple cover page. No big deal. It allows you to get started and to build confidence right off the bat. Okay. Now, the second thing that I wanted to share, though, is this. I want to talk about the fact that we should always have an executive summary. And I will tell you, most models also do not have this. So important. Why is it so important to have an executive summary? I promise you, the first thing your client will always ask you when you show them a model is they will say, what's the answer? The first thing your client is always going to want to know is what's the answer to this particular situation. So you want to show them the answer right up front. So what could it include? I don't know, whatever you need. Could include things like revenues, EBITDA, I don't know, cash flow. It could include ratios. Maybe it's got NPVs, IRRs, whatever. Whatever you need to help make a decision is going to be upfront. And this needs to be customized for every model. Every model is going to have different output metrics that are needed to help make the decision, but include it up front because it's the first thing people want to know. What's the answer? So that's why in our model, guys, remember when I showed you our model here, in our executive summary, I have some simple things here. We've got revenues and revenue growth. We've got EBITDA with margins and growth rates. We've got net income. It doesn't matter. We just made something up. And we're doing this under a base case, under a best case, and under the worst case. But the first thing my client will want to know is what's the answer? And I can say, here, this is what you were looking for to help make your decision, whatever these numbers are. Fine. Where things start to get a little bit more contentious is what I want to now talk about is point number 3. My strong recommendation is in a model, I'm put it here, is the next thing I strongly encourage you to do in a model is to have a section with all the assumptions. And by the way, we like to keep our assumptions blue. I will talk about that in just a moment. I'm going to say many models do not have the assumptions up front. Let's take a look at the model again. Can you come back with me, please? Watch this. I'm in the model. This is the Excel version, guys. Take a look. I've got a cover sheet. Here it is. Took 5 minutes to make this. That's it. I have, here's the executive summary. Then the next thing I'm going to show people is the assumptions. And there's all of them. The general assumptions. I've got some equity assumptions, all the tax assumptions, my interest rates, my depreciation rates. You can see the costs. And as I scroll down, there's more assumptions on income tax and working capital. But the point is they're all here up front. And many models don't have that. Guys, quick show of hands. How many of you have ever seen a model that did not have an assumption section? Or not, maybe did you see a model where some of the assumptions were up front, but a lot of the assumptions were not? They were scattered. Because if you don't have the assumptions up front, then they get scattered. They get scattered in 100 different places. Sorry, I'm looking over. How many of you have ever seen a model where the assumptions are scattered all over the place? Yeah, a lot of hands going up all over the place. We see that all the time. I'm going to show you some great tips here. First of all, why do I recommend, guys, why do I recommend that it's really nice to have all the assumptions up front? Let me show you. Because in my experience, I've seen this 100 times. It's so helpful to have all assumptions up front. Why? I promise you this will happen to you, because after you show your client the answer, okay, after you show your client the answer, which is the executive summary, the next thing they want to know every single time, the next thing your client wants to know after you show them the answer is they want to know, how did you get there? How did you get there? What decisions did you make? What assumptions did you make? What did you assume for growth rates and commodity prices? So in our model, I can say, if I show my client the answer and they say, Ian, how did you get there? How did you generate these EBITDAs? And I can say, well, that's a great question. Let's flip the page. And if I'm in, let's just even go back to my PDF. If I'm in the printout or the PDF and I show them the answer and they say, how did you get there? I'll say, great question. These were all the assumptions. This is what we assumed for operating costs. This is what we assumed for depreciation, et cetera, et cetera. And they understand how it works. And they can challenge me and they can say, I have a number that's too high or too low, but we can talk intelligently about all the inputs. And I will tell you, this is very easy to do if you first planned the model. If you first built a strong plan, then it's very easy to just make a list of all the assumptions and enter them in. And I would say this, make the page look nice. You notice we put all of our assumptions in categories, in boxes. I don't care how you do it, just make it look nice. And I mentioned this a few times already. What we typically do is make the assumptions, or if you want to call them the inputs, blue. That's kind of industry convention, is that outputs in models are typically black, whereas inputs are typically blue. Why do we do that? Just so it's obvious, right? So if I'm in the model now, you can see, most people can see very clearly which are the cells that are inputs and which are the cells, these are all inputs, they're blue, versus the numbers that are going to calculate on the model sheet. Anything black is a calculation that's going to calculate all by itself. So that's that is a simple point there. But now I want to get to the contentious issue, and I'm going to spend a few minutes showing you some great tips. Why did I encourage you to keep them up front? Guys, over the years, I have had so many people say to me, yeah, Ian, I get it. I understand. It's nice to have all the assumptions up front. It makes it easy to change the model, and it makes it easy to read the model, I can present it easy. But I always get people that say, yeah, but. They'll say to me, yeah, but the reason why I don't do it, they'll say to me, I'll put a note here. I'll tell you, some people don't. I wish I could hear some of your thoughts around this. Some people don't keep assumptions up front. And this is why. They'll say to me, Ian, the reason I don't keep my assumptions up front, because when they make a change, when they change an assumption, they want to see the answer right away. Okay, when they make a change to an input, they want to see exactly what it's going to do. They want to see the output. What is it going to do to the answer? Let me show you an example. What people will say to me is, what if I change my raw material cost? What if I increase it? It was 226 and I make it 256. If I increase my raw material cost, what does that do? Okay, I changed it. Well, so what? That didn't do anything. I can't see it. Well, now they have to say, well, to check it, they have to go, let's say, deep in the model. They got to find the income statement and say, what did that do? What did that do to my EBITDA? What did that do to my net income? And now I forget what I made the assumption. So they're always jumping back and forth, jump from the assumptions back to the model sheet. People tell me that they always are jumping around. So what they prefer to do is keep all the assumptions here. So I get that. I get that. And what I want to share with you is a tip to get the best of both worlds. So what I want to show you now is 3 great tips to keep the assumptions up front, but see the answers. See what's happening to the outputs right away. So 3 really nice tips to do this, and I hope you enjoy one of them. The first one is really simple. The first one just says build an output box right on the assumption page. Pretty simple, but a lot of clients like this. As an example, if you build yourself an assumption page, make one of these boxes a box for outputs. Or if you have some extra space like I do here, take a look. If you've got some extra space here, use it. I'm going to call this model outputs. And I'm simply going to build, look how fast this can be done. I'm going to simply build a box that says, let's say EBITDA, net income, really simple. I will grab my first year. I'll add 1 to it here, no big deal. And I will do this and very, very simply link it up. It's really simple. This is not a big deal at all. All I'm going to do is show, you can see the EBITDAs. I could do the same thing for whatever I wanted. The point is, now, if I was to change one of my inputs and I press enter, well, immediately I can see what that's doing deep inside my model. So that's a very simple idea, but one that can be really, really effective. But I want to show you 2 other tools that you guys might find helpful, that a lot of participants have really enjoyed these tips. And the next one that I want to show you is this. I'm going to suggest that you use Excel's watch window. A really great feature in Excel is Excel's watch window feature. Has anyone used this tool before? Just raise your hands for me, please. Has anyone used, raise your hands. I only see 2 or 3 hands, just a couple hands. Use this. What a great tool this is. Let me show this to you guys. This is the, it lives under this is where it lives. It lives, do you see my menu? I'll use my mouse for a second. It lives under formulas, and there's a button that says watch window. Some of you are probably looking at that and saying, wait a second. Oops, you have to go to watch window. Some of you are thinking, wait a second, I've never seen that menu before. Has that always been there? Well, the feature has in fact always been in Excel, but it used to be hidden. It used to be a hidden feature. In the last few years, they put it right on the menus. And for those of you who are trying to keep your hands on the keyboard, you would go to Alt, press the Alt key, and then the letter M, because M is formula, so Alt M, and then watch window is W. So you could, I'll just add this here. It's Alt M, and then W is going to open up the watch window. Let's go do it, guys. Watch this. Watch what happens when I press Alt M and then W for the watch window. I get this little box, and it says to me, what do you want to watch? I'm going to click this button. It says, let's add a watch. And I am going to click add watch, and I'm going to go where it says, where do you want to go? Well, let me go to the model sheet, and I'm going to watch the first 3 years of EBITDA. I'm going to watch those 3 cells and click add. There we have it. Simple, really simple, right? Let me make it a bit bigger. But let's say I want to watch something else. I'll add another watch, and I'm going to go back to my model sheet, and I'm going to watch 3 years of net income as well. You could keep doing this. You could add debt numbers. You could add ratios, whatever you want. But the beauty is, look, it's all in this box. So now, of course, take a look. If I was to once again change my raw materials to 256 and press enter, look what happens. These numbers all change. It's very powerful. So now I can see right here what's going on the screen. And as I change an input, I see exactly what that's doing to some of my output calcs. I do not need to jump all over the place. So very simple, very effective. And guys, look, even if I go to a different sheet, it's still here unless you minimize it. So really helpful. I really hope you guys try. How many of you are going to try this tool when you next open up Excel or try model? Raise your hands if you're going to try it. I really hope you guys tried. Yeah, great. You know, a couple new tips can really add a lot and help you watch things fantastic in your model. So that's a really nice one. A lot of people tell me they enjoy it. I'm going to show you another way to do this though. Another great feature that you can use to watch your outputs when you're entering numbers is to use Excel's camera tool. This is even more obscure. Most people have not used this. Excuse me. How many of you, raise your hands, how many of you have ever used Excel's camera tool? I'm looking over. Nobody. Nobody's raised their hand. You're probably all sitting there thinking, what is he talking about? Excel doesn't take pictures. I didn't know Excel had a camera in it. Well, it does, and you never heard of it. Nobody here's raised their hands. That's amazing. A huge number, and nobody's raised their hands. Yeah, because it's very rare. Nobody's heard of it. But watch, guys, look at my screen. Do you guys see I'm mousing over this button. It says camera. I'm thinking, what the heck? Well, the reason you've never heard of the camera tool is because it's hidden. Remember I told you that the watch window used to be hidden? Well, there's a lot of tools that are hidden. So how do you find it? Well, first you have to make it accessible. You need to go to the Tools Options menu. So I'm going to say go to File Options to activate. Watch this. I'm going to do this really fast so you can come back and look at the recording after. You go to the File menu, okay? And then you go Options. You just go to your normal File Options menu. That's it. Go to your normal File Options menu, and then you want to access up here. This is the Quick Access Toolbar. So I'm going to say Quick Access Toolbar. Do you see this, guys? I'm going to click on Quick Access Toolbar. And when you get to the Quick Access Toolbar, look what happens. You can go to All Commands. And when you go to All Commands, you can see a list of every single feature in Excel. Look at this. This is amazing. You probably never saw most of these things. There are hundreds and hundreds of features in Excel you've never heard of, like 3D effects, a 3D map, 3D rotation. Look at all this stuff. I'm scrolling down. I'm still in the A's. Look at all these features. Some of them are on the menus. Most of them are not. And as you scroll down, I'm still in the A's. I'm into the B's. Look at all these features. And in the C's, here's the camera. When you click on camera and click add, it'll go to the right-hand side. And when you've got 5 minutes, play around. There's some really cool things in Excel you just never heard about before. And now that you've got a camera here, look, it appears on the top of your screen. It says camera. Now watch this. Let's go back to our model, please, guys. Let's pretend I want to take a picture of my income statement. Look what I'm doing. I'm going to select the income statement. I'm going to grab the whole income statement and click the camera. It effectively is now taking a picture of it. And I have my cursor turned into a little plus, a crosshair. Do you see that? Great. Well, now I'm going to go back to the Assumption tab, and up at the top here, I'm going to click once at the very top, and I pasted a picture of my income statement. But this is not a dead picture like most pictures. Watch this, guys. If I was to click on let's say an input, raw material, and I type in, let's say 256, and I press enter, watch please what happens to my picture. It changed. Every number changed. This is a dynamic picture. So this is a really great way to paste little images of your model up front. If you're building a dashboard, if you're building a nice visual interface, a visual interface of some sort, a toolbar, it's really great. Just out of curiosity, who's going to try this? I'm just curious. How many of you are going to try the camera to activate it? Great. Yeah, a lot of hands going up. Fantastic. Try it. because I think you'll enjoy. Once you do it once, it's so simple. It's so simple, but it's a really great way to make sure that when you change something in a model, you can see what that's doing to your results. So that gets us, guys, then a little bit further to, let's go back then to here, because now I'm into tip number 5. Okay, I need about another 6 or 7 minutes to get through tip 5, and then we're going to quickly blast through the last 5 tips here. So I told you that you want to keep your assumptions up front because that allows you to communicate clearly. It allows you to say, what's this model all about? What are the assumptions? But now I've shown you, when you have the assumptions up front, you can also show people the answer using the tools that I just showed you. The next thing, though, that I strongly encourage you to build in any model, if we're talking about model flow, is I strongly encourage you to build a scenarios page. And I would say that every model should have this. Every single model that you ever build should have a scenario page. It's one of the most important pages, in any model. I swear to you, every single model I've ever built has one of these. Let's take a look at it. Okay, guys, it's so important. We like to put it on its own tab. So does everyone see this? There's a sheet. There's a tab called scenarios. And it's really short. There's not much on here, but all this is, you can see it says economic and pricing scenarios. All this is, guys, I'll put a note, is it's just more assumptions. It's it. But these are the critical assumptions. So because they're so critical, assumptions, we have 3 cases. You'll notice I built a base case, I built a best case, and I built a worst case. I have 3 cases. So take a look. For cost inflation, I have a base case, a best case, and a worst case. For sales prices, I have a base case, a best case, and a worst case. Same thing for sales volume. I have a base, a best, and a worst. So the big question is why? Why do I have a base, best, and worst case just for these 3 variables? Why? Well, these are the key drivers. These are the most important assumptions in the model. And because they're so critical and hard to forecast, remember we identified them up front. Because they're so important, I want more than one option. And so this is a critical page here. It's got the most critical variables, commodity prices, the things that are really hard to forecast, I'm going to capture here up front as a scenario page with 3. Now you could have more. You don't have to just have 3 cases. You could have 4 cases. You could have 5 cases. You could have a super worst case, a super best case, whatever you want. I chose to have 3. But what I want to show you right now is how to build this page. And there are 2 great Excel skills I want to show you very, very quickly before we move into the last part of the webinar. If you want to ever build a scenario, step 1 is to build this large rectangle. Does everyone see this? I've got a large rectangle with 3 rows. So this big box is my assumptions. These numbers are blue, okay? I've got all the assumptions, they're blue. So this is effectively step 1 in the process. What do you think inflation will be? What do you think under the base, best, and worst? What do you think selling prices will be? What do you think volumes will be? Base, best, and worst. Very simple. That's step 1. Then you need a cell with a switch. All I need now is one cell that has a switch, and the switch is set to a number 1. This tells me which one are we running in the model. Do I want to run the base or the best or the worst? So this switch is going to control which one we're using. But now what I need is a skinny row. Does everyone see this black row? It's skinny row. It's black, which means it's a formula. This is the live case. This is the one that's running in the model. So because it's the one running in the model, I need to put a formula in here. Many, many people will use an if statement. My strong recommendation is to use a very simple, powerful tool in Excel, and that's simply the choose function. Choose function is really, really simple, very powerful. Clients that I've ever worked with love it. They love this feature because it's so simple, because it's so elegant. Look at the choose function, guys. And by the way, there is a slide in the presentations on how to use a choose, but it's really simple. It just says, hey, where's your switch? Here's the switch. And then it wants to know, where are the cases? Where's the base? Where's the best? And where's the worst? That's it. Where are your three cases? Where is the switch and where are your cases? And so very simply, if you put a 1 in the switch, what happens is the choose function pulls out the next item. So the order depends on the order that you enter the cells in the formula. If your switch has a 1, the choose will pull out the next item right after the switch. If you put a 2 in here, it'll pull out the second item. And you see the idea. If there's a 3 here, it'll pull out the third, and so on and so forth. But we don't have lots of brackets. It's very simple and very easy to use and to run. Watch this. If I put a 2 in here, it's now pulling out the best case, because that one is the second one in my formula. And if I put a 3 in here, it would pull out the worst case. Very simple. And this, again, is the one running the model. This is the one running the model is this. So the model is linking to the top row, which means, of course, that as you change the switch, the entire model is updated. So that's a very simple tool. If you've never used a choose, I highly recommend it and encourage you to play with it because it's so simple. But on top of that, there was one more thing you've been noticing is there's a little drop-down box. I don't like to leave this number 1 exposed. I don't like to have that number 1 just sitting there, just accessible, because it doesn't mean anything. Your client is going to say, hey, what does this number 1 mean? Why do you have a number 1 floating or just sitting there? It's not obvious what that 1 means. I want to give my client a user-friendly interface, a drop-down switch to actually play with it. It creates a lot of confidence and it makes it feel like a piece of software. So let me show you here very, very quickly how to build a little drop down if you've never done it before. The first thing you need to do is to see that you need your developer menu. Okay. So guys, just by a quick show of hands, if you have Excel open right now, guys, how many of you do not see the developer? Raise your hand if you do not. Can you raise your hand, please? If you do not have a Word developer on your, yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of hands go up. Thank you. That means you have never used these features before. Thank you. A lot of hands are going up. You've never seen this. If you do not have developer, whether you're in a Mac or a PC, it doesn't matter. You need to enable it. For reasons that are not obvious to me, I don't know why this is the case. This always comes off. The default is Excel keeps this off. You must turn it on. So how do you turn it on? Watch this. On a PC, you go back to your file options menu. Watch where I'm going to go, please. You go file, and then you go back into options. Okay, file options. From here, you need to say, let's customize the ribbon. The ribbon is the bar at the very top. You're going to customize it, and watch this, guys, on the right. You must turn this one on. Do you see it says developer? Turn that on, put a check mark in it, and it will always now stay on. Okay, that help? It will always be on. You should now have a brand new menu here called developer. Very simple. So watch this. Now that you have it, okay, I'm going to click developer. Again, I'm going to do this fast, but come back and watch this again if you want to slow it down. From developer, I'm going to click insert. Okay. Now, very careful. You want the form controls. You want the form controls. You do not want the ActiveX ones. These ones need macros to run. You want the form controls. And the one that I want is the combo box. Do you see this? The second one is the combo box. Watch, please, what happens when I click it. If I click combo box, I get a cursor and I can draw one. I simply drew a combo box. That's it. All you need to do now is right click on it and format the control. Okay, you right click and you format this new control. And it just wants to know 2 things, guys. It just wants 2 things. It wants to know, where's the input range? Well, the input range means this. The input range means, where is the text? Where are the words that you want to see in your dropdown? Very simple. And the second thing it wants to know is the link. Where is the cell link? Where is the numeric cell that it should change? And that's this number 1. And then you click OK, and that's it. I'll delete mine, but that's what I did here. The beauty is, now that it's working, you can open it up. When you click on base, it runs the base case. If you click on best, it runs the best case. And when you click on worst, it runs the worst case. It's so simple. It's not a macro. It's not VBA. All it does, guys, all it does is it enters a number into your actual numeric switch. So if you click the first item, it puts a number 1 in that cell. If you click the second item, it will put a number 2. And if you click the third item, it puts a 3. That's it. And of course, the choose function is looking at the number 1, 2, or 3. So you don't ever have to manually change this number. Your drop down does it for you. And then what do? Then all you do is you activate it, you right click on it, and you slide it over and you cover it up. And now your boss, your client thinks, wow, this is awesome. I've got a beautiful user-friendly control. Try this, guys. Please use this. I promise you, a scenario page is so critical. It will benefit any model you build. And I really hope you can use those features to build a great scenario page in any model. So let's now blast through. I do need about 10 minutes, and then we'll stop for questions. We're almost done. I want to quickly fly through the remaining 5 because I don't have any technical demos. These are very important. So these are super important tips. They just can do them very quickly in about a minute or 2 each. The first one says, number 6 says, build your financial statements vertically. This is not always obvious, but guys, take a look at my screen here. When I go to my model sheet, take a look. I have an income statement. Underneath the income statement, I've got the cash flow statement. And underneath the cash flow, I've got the balance sheet. That's not what people always do. In fact, guys, has anyone ever seen a model where each financial statement was on its own separate tab? Has anyone, raise your hand, has anyone ever seen like an income statement tab and then a balance sheet tab and then a cash flow tab? Raise your hands if you've seen that. I'm sure I see a lot of hands going up. Yeah, a lot of you have seen that or you've done that before. Can I be very, very clear about that? It's not wrong. It's not wrong to do that. We call that a horizontal approach. This is a vertical. We call this a vertical approach to model design and construction, where you keep things vertical. If you have all your financial statements on separate sheets, we call that a horizontal approach. We actually have a sample horizontal model on the website as well. A lot of people do like modeling horizontal, but I will tell you, the reason I'm recommending that you keep your statements vertically is because I have seen so many more errors when people build horizontal. When you build your models, when you build your statements on different sheets, it means you have to have so much more crisscrossing, crossing links. Because what do you know about a financial statements, guys, for any company in the world? They talk to each other. Look, income statement starts with revenue. It ends with net income. I don't care what company in the world you're talking about. The income statement ends with net income. Well, the cash flow statement of every company in the world begins with net income. Look how simple this is. Look how easy it is for me to link if I keep it vertical, keep it aligned. It's so simple. And when I want to add back depreciation, look, it's right here. You're not going to make a mistake. And it's very easy to audit. Stays linear, stays vertical. Try this. I think you might actually like it a lot. People actually surprise themselves and they say, this actually works really well. They'll just say to me, I never thought about it. I never thought about doing that. I always just thought you should keep your statements on different sheets. By the way, every cash flow statement ends with ending cash. And every balance sheet begins with ending cash. Look at that. Look how simple that is to keep it aligned, vertical, simple. So that's one tip that I think you'll find it so fast and easy to build if you keep your statements oriented vertically. That's tip 6. 7 and 8 though say something else. 7 and 8, and this is a huge one, guys. This is so important. Says, do not do any work on your financial statements. I never want to see big formulas on financial statements. By the way, guys, over the years, I've given you my email address. You've got it. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me. You can find me through the FMI or through our training business, the Marquee Group. I'm always happy to take questions if you have questions. Over the years, hundreds of people have emailed because their models aren't working and they want some help. A lot of former students will email us and they'll just send an email and it just says help. They'll just say, I'm desperate. I can't get my model working. By the way, guys, has anyone ever seen a model where the balance sheet didn't balance? Raise your hands. Has anyone ever, of course, has anyone ever seen a model where the balance sheet didn't balance? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I expect every single hand to go up. If you've ever worked on a model, you've had a time where the balance sheet didn't balance. It happens to everybody. And I can tell you, well, there's lots of reasons why model balance sheets might not balance. But if you're struggling with it, whenever I look at models that are not balancing, the very first thing I do is I go to the income statement and I usually notice big, huge formulas right on the income statement. I never want to see big, giant formulas right on the financial statements. What I want to see, guys, look at this. Revenue, I just want to see links. Look at that. If I click on my revenue line on the income statement, it's just a link. What about this one? The cost of goods sold. It's just a link. What about depreciation? It's just a link. There is no big giant formulas. This is such a critical tip. Do not build big formulas on your financial statements. They're just links. So where are we linking to? Well, take a look. It's so simple because I'm on the same worksheet and in the same column, in column K. Where am I linking to? Let's follow it to K26. I'm just linking to a revenue schedule. I do all my work on a schedule above or below. I like to say build it and then link it. Remember that, build it and link it. Build a schedule and link it in. What about this? What if I want to get my cost of goods sold? There's no big formula here. Look where I'm linking to. The cost schedule, again, right on top of me. So you first build a schedule for a particular line item, build your schedule, get it working, and then link it in. So what about this? Well, obviously my depreciation is coming from a depreciation schedule. It's so simple. And my interest expense is coming from a debt and interest schedule. The point is, do not do any big formulas on the income statement. Look, obviously things like net income, well, that's a simple calculation. That's easy. Total income tax, so that's a simple addition. Like all of my profit numbers should be either additions or subtractions, depending on how you're doing it. That's easy. That's a simple formula. I just never want to see a big formula. So those are points 7 and 8. I did them in 1 minute, but so important. Do not do any big formulas on your financial statements. That leads to errors very, very quickly. All your work happens on schedules. So you build up a revenue schedule, link it in, then you do the costs, and so on and so forth until they're all done and you link them all in. So the very last 2 tips I'll share, and then we will be done and take some questions, is this. So now I've told you that one of the big secrets of building a powerful model is don't do the work on the actual financial statements, build schedules. But what about on the schedules? Well, on the schedules, I want simple formulas. I never want to see huge, long formulas because they're hard to get right and they're hard to audit. Simple formulas. And what's the trick? How do you build simple formulas? You repeat your data. Watch this. Here's my revenue schedule, guys. You see that? What have I done? I've got a section to forecast the sales prices. I've got a section to forecast the volume. So I'm forecasting the selling prices. I'm forecasting the sales volumes for this company. And then, of course, look at my revenue. My revenue line will be just so simple. It's just price times volume. That's easy. My revenue is just price times volume. That's no big deal at all. Very, very simple. Well, what about the sales price? Well, watch this, guys. This company has a gross selling price. Okay, this company has a gross price, and then they deduct freight and warehousing charges. Okay, freight and warehousing gets deducted because the seller pays the freight, and then they get down to a net revenue, a net price. I'm sorry. They have a gross price, they deduct freight and warehousing charges, and then they get down to a net selling price. Look at the net price. Look how simple. It's just the gross minus the freight. But the reason it's such a simple formula is because everything I need is right here. My gross selling price was one of my assumptions. It actually lived on the scenario page right here. So what did I do? I first repeated it on the model sheet and then I used it. So take a look. I've got a gross selling price on my scenario page. We looked at that. Let's first repeat it. I just simply linked it and repeated it. I'm also repeating my cost inflation because I need that here. Because I've repeated these values, look what I can do. Now I can calculate freight and warehousing. Look how simple my freight cost. It's just last year times 1 plus look how simple. That's a simple formula. And then my net price is the gross minus the freight. And guys, if I showed you every single formula in this model, you would see every single formula is just a link. I'm repeating a cell or I'm building a tiny calculation. And that's the trick. And if you can do that, look, build a simple link or a tiny calculation, everything is right there. It will all be so simple and so transparent. My very last comment for a last minute, and then I will take questions, is this. Guys, has anyone ever seen this? Has anybody ever seen a formula that looked like this? I'm going to build something really silly. I'm going to take a number on one sheet. I'm going to divide by a number on a different sheet. Who cares? I'm going to multiply by something here, whatever. And then I'm going to deduct something. I'm making up some nonsense, whatever. Okay, look what I got. Can you raise your hands? Has anybody ever seen in a spreadsheet a formula that looks like this, that's linking to lots of different sheets? Raise your hands, please, if you've ever seen formulas linking to lots and lots of different sheets. Yeah, Ian, I can see your hand. Aaron, Alan, yeah, thank you. A lot of hands went up there. Perfect. Guys, can I tell you something? You never want to do that. I never want to build formulas like this. I never want to see them because it's so hard to audit and to check. So what do we do instead? What do I do if what do we teach people to do? What do we encourage you to do? Don't build it like this. It's so hard to follow. What do we do? Repeat, add some blank rows. Repeat the first variable, repeat it once and label it, whatever the heck this thing is, label it. Very easy. And then take the second variable and instead of keeping it in a big formula, put it in its own cell, repeat it, label it so people understand what it is, and then take the third one, whatever the heck this thing is. I don't know. I'm making it up. It's silly. And I'll put that. Now look, each one of these is in its own separate cell. I can follow along and I can understand it. And now look at how nice this is, guys. Instead of a formula like this, now I can just say, well, let's take this guy, whatever this means, divide by this one, multiply by that one, and minus that one. And of course I get the same answer, but now it's so user-friendly. It's so simple to read and understand. So very powerful. And my strong recommendation is this, and we're now done. My promise to you to start was, regardless of whether you've done a lot of modeling or a little model, if just a little bit of modeling, I promise you, if you think about these tips and you try to incorporate even a couple of them, your models will start to become better, slicker, more powerful, and more transparent than any other models. Minimize your errors and make it much more confident for people to make decisions. So I hope that these resonate. I hope you like some of the Excel tips that I showed you on the watch window, drop down boxes, the camera. And again, so I hope this made sense. Please try this. It'll make a huge impact, I believe, on your models, and don't be shy to reach out. So I want to thank you guys again for having us in. If you want to see another webinar, as I said, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. Send me any emails if you have questions. We're going to do some questions. I'll ask Julian to come back here. We can try and go for 10 minutes or so. But let's see if there were some questions and then we'll wrap things up. So, oh, and by the way, if you, you're going to get the CFA side is going to send you a feedback form after the webinar is over. And if you have any comments, please, for me or for the society, that would be greatly appreciated. So Julian, are there any questions that came in that people wanted to address?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So we've received a ton of questions in the Q&A and a ton of questions in the chat. So I'll just prioritize a little bit and
Why
go
don't you do
through.
some of them that you think we can go through quickly here? Why don't you go through some that we can catch, so cover a bunch of them? And guys, if I don't get to your question, just email me. But let's try and power through a bunch of these quickly if we can.
Sounds great. Okay, first question comes from Mike. How long would you expect someone proficient in Excel to be able to build your demo model?
Great question, Mike. Thank you for asking that. So first of all, by the way, this demo model is exactly what we expect people to do in the level 1 of our financial modeling exam. So level 1 is all about building up a financial model from scratch. So in that particular level 1 of the advanced financial model exam, I think this exam is unique worldwide because it's the only exam that asks people to actually build up a model. It's not multiple choice. And on the exam, it's a 4-hour time limit. And many people on the exam are able to get done in 3 hours or 3.5 hours. And the level of detail is very similar. We give you a case study and 3 years of historical financials. And so why I'm telling you that is because when people get good at it, they can build up a model like this. It's about 15 pages on paper in under 4 hours. Now, I know what you're asking is how long does it take to practice until you can do that? The answer is it depends. On our surveys, people tell us that they practice anywhere from 25 to 100 hours. And that depends on if you've had no modeling experience. If you've never built a model before, you need to, you'll either want to do a course or you'll want to just take this model and practice, learn to build up each schedule and how to tie them together, how to connect them all into the statements. If you've done a bunch of modeling or looked at models, yeah, you might only need 20 hours, 25 hours to practice it. But if you've never done any modeling, it could take longer, 50, 60, 70 or more hours. But then you'll be but that gets you to the level where you're really excellent, where you're truly proficient, world class, because you can build, then that would mean you could do one of these in under 4 hours. And that's what we're trying to validate people for. So thank you for asking that. I hope that helps. If you want to discuss it further, let me know.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Sam. Question is, do you use any software applications beside Excel?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you, Sam. There's only really 2 ways in the world to build forecasts. You can either use what I call black box software. Black box software is just like any other software. There's forecasting. There are hundreds of them that just allow you to do forecasting. Your bookkeeping software might allow you to do forecasts. There are dozens and dozens of software programs that allow you to build forecasts. So that's one category. A lot of companies use software to forecast and plan, but every single company I've ever spoken to feels that when they use black box software, it's a bit limiting. It's not as flexible. They can't make the changes that we want. So what they do is they download the data and then they dump it into Excel. Can you guys raise your hands? Has anyone been in an experience like that where you got some software, but it's not as flexible as you like? So you download a bunch of stuff into Excel, run your analysis in Excel, and then you kind of push it back up again. Yeah, some of you have done that before. Sure. That's kind of common. The other way to build forecasts is use spreadsheets. And Excel is still far and away the most common spreadsheet people use for models. Although more and more people are using Google Sheets. It's getting very, very good. In fact, there are some areas where Google Sheets is actually better than Excel at this point. The keyboard shortcuts aren't as efficient. I don't know too many big companies using Google Sheets yet, but it'll start to happen. So Excel is still far and away the most common tool used for modeling. I love Google Sheets for collaboration. When our teams are working on things at the same time, Google Sheets is great, but for a model, I would still use Excel. So yeah, very, very good. Are there others we can do?
Yeah. So our next question comes from Cynthia. Is a best practice to make sure your model can operate as a fillable PDF where you can plug and play with numbers?
Is it interesting? I actually have never heard that question before. That's a really great question. As a fillable PDF. So I think you'd need something else as well. I assume that you mean like a user form, like when you get, sometimes people email you a PDF where you've got a user form. You know, there would be ways using things like Python or other tools where you could, I guess, like, it's a clever idea. If you needed people to contribute and you built a user form, and again, I'd love to discuss this and flesh it out with you further. But if you had sort of a user form, I'm sure we could extract the data and automatically dump it into Excel. I'll be honest, I haven't seen people do that. I guess the simple answer is most of the clients we've ever worked with haven't felt the need to do that. Typically, the PDF is like the end of the line. Typically, you're building the model, making your changes in the model, and then you're creating a bit of a presentation output. So I'm not usually needing, I have never created a fillable PDF from a model, because for me, that's the end. I just want to show people what it looks like as like a deck, as a bunch of slides. But I'm sure there are some great, suggestions and ideas on how to use it that way. I just haven't seen that. I haven't done that. But if you have a clever idea, let me know. I'd love to hear it. But yeah, thanks for asking that.
Awesome. Our next question comes from AG. If you were looking at an oil producer, would you put the price of oil in scenarios and then just pull in the live assumptions into the assumptions tab?
When you, yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by the live assumptions, but to answer the first part of your question, so the first part of your question is 100%. If you're doing, whenever we do oil and gas models, 100%, obviously the price of oil, whether you're using WTI, West Texas Intermediate, or whatever your, Brent, whatever your benchmark price is, absolutely, that would be here. So you would have your benchmark price, and you want to run a base, best, and a worst, or however many cases you wanted. Maybe you have a client case. Maybe you're looking at one particular bank and you want to use their case. You can have as many cases as you want. Look, very quickly, I can have 4 cases if you want, whatever, that doesn't matter. So for sure, you'd have your commodity price. You might also have a differential. I mean, as you know, for a lot of oil and gas companies, the differential that they realize relative to the benchmark can squeeze, can widen and tighten over time. So you might have, you might have the differential as a scenario if you weren't sure, what the base, best, or worst might be of that differential over time for your particular product out of your company. And then I would repeat both of those variables on the model sheet on the pricing section and build them up as you build up pricing and then ultimately into revenue. So 100%, look exactly the same way. For sure, AG, that's what we do. What we mean the second part again of his question then, Julian, he was asking about the live.
And then just pull in the live assumptions into the assumptions tab.
Oh, yeah. I think I know what you mean. I think what you mean by that, if I got that right, is if you mean that, yeah, as I wrote that down, the live case. I think what you're saying is, would you then just pull the live one onto the assumption case? AG, I always think of the assumption page and the scenario page as my assumptions. So we wouldn't typically have the scenario show up on the assumptions. These 3 pages make up the 3 pages of assumptions. What do I mean by that? Let me show you my PDF of the model. Take a look at this, please. So when I'm presenting the model, look what I've got. I've got my executive summary. Here's my first page of assumptions. There's 1 number per variable. Here's my second page of assumptions, 1 number per variable. And here is my third page of assumptions. The scenario page is just another page of assumptions. So but these ones have more than 1 option. So from here, once you build a live case, then on the model sheet, then I repeat them on the model sheet. I don't think there's any need to repeat them on the assumption sheet. Just make the live case flow right into your model so that it's easy to build calculations. And again, AG, whether it's this scenario variable or whether it's actually one of the numbers that was on the assumption page, repeat them. Look, here are my costs. Repeat it off the assumption page and then build a formula. So simple and elegant to build it that way, right? Yeah, so I hope that helps. You want to do a couple more here, Julian? Let's keep going. Some good questions.
Sounds great. So Philip asks, would using the combo box be considered superior to data validation method to toggle scenarios?
Yeah, great question. I love the question. Not superior. I don't like to deem or indicate that certain Excel features are superior to others. They're just different. They work in lots of different ways. So what, and sorry, was it Philip that asked that, you said?
That's right.
Yeah. I told you guys, most importantly, if you're going to build a scenario page, have a switch. And I suggested cover it up with the drop down because it's very user friendly. When your boss gets here, right, Philip, your boss, your client is going to say, this is so cool. Look, I can play with it. I can see what's happening. It's so fun, right? And they actually, you get them sucked in to play with your model when you do this. But your question is, could we use a different feature called data validation? And so if you've never used it before, guys, it lives here, data. And then there's a feature called validation. I think it's under, I don't know why it lives under data and then outline. Nope, not there. Sorry. I use my keyboard. So I don't know. I don't always remember where things live on the menu because I'm just use my keyboard, but it's one of these buttons. And let me find it for you. It's data, this one, I think. Yeah, no, flash fill. One of these here. Here it is, data validation. So onto the keyboard, it is Alt, the letter A, and then it is, V here. V was validation. So again, I just pop it open with my keyboard. And then what data validation says is what do you want to be allowed in a certain cell? So do you see this cell right now, guys? This cell, by default, anything is allowed. But what you could do is you could say, just allow the data from a list. Okay, just allow the data from a list. And my list can be right here. So I can click on this list and that's the only things allowed in this cell. So now when I click OK, look what happens. There's a little teeny drop down. And when I click it, I see my words again, base, best, and worst. So what you're saying, and a lot of people ask me that is it okay just to use data validation? Sure. I love data validation. I use data validation all the time, but I'll be honest, in this specific example on a scenario page, I think it makes more sense to use the drop down. And the main reason is because with a drop down, your boss and your client knows immediately that this is a drop down. They can see it. They can see it. They go, oh, they can play with it. The problem with validation, it's not obvious. You don't realize that it's a switch unless you click on it. When you click on it, you can see the triangle. Otherwise, it's not obvious. People don't realize it's a cell they can play with. So listen, if you like using validation, please use it. It's a great feature. But my point is that as a communication tool and as a user-friendly tool, people tend to like this a lot, the drop down, because it's so obvious and it's user-friendly. Why don't we do one more then, Julian, and then turn it back to the CFA Society. And again, if there's any others that we don't get to, guys, just please email us. We always love to chat.
Sounds great. And a nice note of appreciation from Blaine there in the chat on that choose function.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Thanks, Blaine.
So Ian asks, what other color uses do you recommend?
Fitting to end with Ian asking Ian, right? So thank you, Ian. I noticed, believe it or not, I do not always see piles and piles of Ians in classes or in webinars. So it's always nice to have another Ian in a webinar. What colors do we use? So what I will tell you is there are really only two colors that are sort of like universal, that are sort of like religion, and they are black and blue for the most part. Now, you remember I showed you earlier, we strongly encourage you to make sure that your data inputs are a different color. The most common standard we see globally is for outputs to be black, inputs to be blue, and that's what we did. And why? Because I told you when you look at the screen, for most people, it's easy to see the difference. The other reason for black and blue is because when you print on paper, they both look very dark. They both print nicely. So that's another reason to use black and blue. But I think what you noticed, Ian, is that we have a third color. And you're right. We tend to use a third color. This is not industry standard necessarily, but it's pretty common. We use a third color when I'm doing what I told you, when I'm repeating assumptions. So when I repeat an assumption, I use a third, and it's either like a dark purple or a dark green. You can use whatever, because it's not the color itself is not universal. Another dark color, what this tells me and my client is, oh, they'll say, I understand. This is an assumption. This is an assumption. We're just repeating it. We're just repeating it so that it communicates clearly, but it's not a calculation here. I'm just taking an input cell and showing it again. So this is actually one of my assumption variables displayed. So as you go down, oh, in my cost page, yeah, I'm repeating the first year's cost assumptions, but then the black ones are the calcs. That's something I find very helpful. I would encourage you to use at least two colors. I would say don't use more than 3 or 4. It tends to get confusing when people use more than 3 or 4 colors, but that's sort of those are sort of some of the reasons that I would encourage you to use. Okay, so hope that helps. If there's anything else, let me know. So Chris, on that note, I told you we might go up to 10 minutes over depending on questions, and we have, but thank you for your patience, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Really fun to be with you and for your participation. Again, anything else, let me know. But Chris, I'll turn it back to you. I want to thank you for having us in today and for the opportunity to work with your members.
Wow. Okay. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks, Ian and Julian, for joining us from Toronto. And thanks everyone for joining the session. At the end of the event, you'll see a notice to complete a survey about today's event. That helps us. Your feedback, we need it. We want it. We take it under advisement for our next events. If you have any questions about today's event, please contact the Society at info@cfachicago.org. Ian, I like that camera. Didn't know about that camera feature, so that was pretty cool.
You haven't used the camera yet, Vince? Chris? You'll start using it in all your spreadsheets now, I hope.
I'm gonna have to pull that out. So listen, great to be with you, and I'm sure we'll see you again sometime down the road. Safe travels, and thanks for being here. And please fill out the survey. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.